Welcome to the Way of the Taibhsear podcast. This is episode 12, celebrating the Wheel of the Year. On last week's podcast, we discussed the Pagan Wheel of the Year. This wheel consists of 8 high days, or Sabbats, marking the year off into 8 roughly equal parts. On this week's podcast, we will discuss how Taibhsears and other pagans celebrate each high day of the wheel. Consider what celebrating the Wheel of the Year means to you. What personal meaning could you derive from observing these rituals? How would observing the high days add balance to your own life? The Wheel of the Year is the pagan celebration of the cycles of the seasons as the sun waxes and wanes on the horizon. The celestial events of the heavens are a metaphor for the cycle of life on earth. Most pagans express this concept with the phrase, "as above, so below." This metaphor is especially apt when applied to the life cycle of human beings. In the Wheel of the Year, the period between the winter solstice and the vernal equinox represents childhood. Just as the sun is born again at midwinter, and the days begin to grow longer, human children are born and grow to adolescence. This is the period of quickening. As an infant grows into a toddler, then into a pre-adolescent, the child becomes first aware of itself as a separate individual, then as a part of the world. This is a formative time when the child figures out his or her relationship to nature, to self, and to others. The period between the vernal equinox and the summer solstice is a metaphor for youth and adolescence. At this time of year, the flora and the fauna of the earth are growing to full bloom and reaching maturity. Likewise, children are leaving behind their childhoods and growing up to become members of society. It's a time for gaining independence from their parents and finding their place in the world. The period between the summer solstice and the autumnal equinox is reflected in the human life cycle as the period of maturity. After the summer solstice, the plants begin to give their fruits, and soon harvest time will be near. As humans mature, they marry and have children, the fruit of their love. They also make their way into the world and begin to enjoy the fruits of their careers and education. The period between the autumnal equinox and the winter solstice equates to the period of old age in the human life cycle. The fruits we've planted are being harvested and put away for our winters. Our investments are paying off. It's a time for quiet contemplation of the seasons that have gone before. And just as the trees shed their leaves in preparation for winter, many people begin deciding how to shed their possessions by preparing wills or inheritance agreements. Likewise, as the trees drop their nuts and berries onto the ground, and these become the new trees and plants in the new spring, older humans may drop the seeds of their wisdom upon the fertile soil of the young minds of the younger ones, who are willing and able to receive their wisdom.
January man, he walks abroad in woolen coat and boots of leather. The February man still wipes the snow from off his head and blows his hand. The man of March, he sees the spring and wonders what the year will bring, and hopes for better weather. In April rain, the man goes down to watch the birds come in man inside the man is young and wants to lend a hand, and grins at each new colour. And in July the man in cotton shirts, he sits and thinks on being idle. The August man in thousands takes the road to watch the sea and find the sun. September man is standing near to saddle up another year, and autumn is his bridal. The man of New October takes the reins, and early frost is on his shoulder. Poor November man sees fire and wind and mist and rain and winter gale. December man looks through the snow to let 11 brothers know they're all a little older. And the January man comes round again in woolen coat and boots of leather, to take another turn and walk along the icy road he knows so well. The January man is here at the start of each and every year, along this road forever.
Why celebrate the Wheel of the Year? Off and on I have spent many years as a solitary druid, then as a lone Taibhsear. When I moved to a new town and left my first grove back in the early 1980s, there were many years when I no longer engaged in a ritualistic observation of the Wheel of the Year. At the time, I didn't see any point to performing a ritual if there was no group to share it with. Over the years, as I've talked to many newbie pagans, I've found that this attitude is prevalent among many of us. The thought seems to be that if one of the points of a ritual is to raise group energy, how can that be accomplished if there is no group? But as I've grown over the years, I've come to realize that there's comfort in ritual, even if it's done alone. If human beings find themselves in a situation without a way to express themselves through ritual, they tend to spontaneously invent their own rituals. If you've ever watched children on a playground, you know this to be true, as they will create their own rituals. There's something within us that seeks the security and stability of doing things in a familiar pattern. Over time, the best parts of our rituals become traditions. If a tradition becomes widespread enough, it can be reassuring to know that people all over the world are engaging in the same practice at the same time. For example, if you visit any pagan community in the world for the winter solstice, you can be assured that they will probably be celebrating the rebirth of the sun in some shape or fashion. Even if you're in solitary practice, ritual can be useful and edifying. It's easy to neglect performing ritual when you're alone, simply because there's nobody else there to help you or to participate with you. Even so, I would recommend that you make some effort to perform some sort of rite for each high day and for each other significant rite of passage in your life, even if it's only a 5 or 10 minute meditation and offering. By doing so, you include yourself in the circle of pagans and Taibhsears worldwide who are engaging in the same practice at the same time. Knowing that you are a part of something larger, even if you're alone at home, is an empowering thought. The celebration of the Wheel of the Year is one of the ways in which a Taibhsear seeks the Imbus, or the Awen. If you find that your ritual practice has become empty and meaningless, and you feel you're just going through the motions, then the time has probably come to re-examine how you approach ritual. Remember, there is no right or wrong way to perform a rite, as long as it has meaning for you. If your ritual practice is meaningless, then take a look at what you're doing and find ways to replace the uninspiring portions with more meaningful symbols. Also remember to focus on the intent of the rite itself, so that the meaning doesn't get lost in the details. In this podcast this week, we will examine some of the elements of a Taibhsear ritual. This list isn't all-inclusive, but it will give you a good place to start when crafting your own ceremonies. If something not discussed on today's show has special significance to you, don't hesitate to incorporate that into your own ritual practice as well. Elements of a meaningful ritual. Have you ever attended a pagan or nature-centered event or rite? If so, what were the elements of the event that made it an enjoyable or a meaningful experience for you? If you've never attended such an event, imagine that you were invited to one. What elements would be most likely to make it enjoyable or meaningful for you? Before discussing the elements of a Taibhsear ritual, we should first talk about what makes a good rite in general. There are several components that can be used to enhance the effectiveness of any rite or ritual. Some work better than others, and some are only for specific occasions or specific groups. Some work better in solitary practice, and some work better in large gatherings. Each of these elements has its own characteristics. It's ultimately up to you to decide how to best blend these elements into your own ritual practice. When choosing, select those elements that enhance the purpose and the meaning you have chosen for your rite. Music is the language of emotion. The addition of music to any ritual creates another layer of meaning not easily accessible by mere spoken words. The Celtic bards of old were well known for their musical abilities. It is said that a well-crafted bardic song could stop armies in mid-battle. We've all had the experience of being deeply moved by a well-written piece of music or poetry. And as paganism has grown, we've begun to develop our own collection of favorite pagan songs and chants, sort of a pagan hymnal, if you choose to look at it that way. Many of these are recognizable worldwide, and they have become popular additions to many pagan circles. If you choose to incorporate music into your ritual, first think about the mood you're attempting to create. Obviously, a somber occasion like an ancestor vigil for Samhain wouldn't call for lively beat music. Neither would you want a somber dirge for a Beltane celebration. Tailor your music to the season. Next, if you're planning a ritual for a group, consider whether or not you would like the whole group to participate in the musical portion. If you expect everyone to sing, do they all know the words? If you expect everyone to drum, do they all have drums? A little planning ahead of time can eliminate a lot of confusion during the rite. Also be aware that many first-timers at a ritual might be shy and hesitant about singing in a group, so they might need a little more encouragement. During most rituals, there's a time for quiet contemplation and a time for more active participation. When choosing music, the tempo should reflect the mood of the next segment of the ritual. The human heartbeat is around 60 to 80 beats per minute. Music with a tempo below 60 beats per minute tends to be relaxing and soothing, while music with a tempo of 80 beats or above is exciting and rousing. If you're entering a meditative portion of a rite, you don't want to precede that segment with a fast tempo song. Likewise, if you're about to call for active participation, like maybe a spiral dance or other physical activity, you wouldn't want to preface that with a slow-moving song. You should pace your tempos to your moods. Perhaps one of the best ways to include everyone in the musical portion of the rite is through the use of chants. Most chants consist of only one or two short verses or couplets with a simple melody. The stanzas are usually sung over and over again for a prescribed number of times, or until a signal is given from the facilitator of the ritual. The advantage of using chants is that they are easy to remember, and they make attendees active participants instead of passive observers. As our voices unite, individuals are brought into the group mind and spirit, sharing their energy. Another way to encourage group participation is through drumming. If you've ever attended a pagan ritual, chances are you've seen plenty of drum circles. One of the reasons for this is that almost anyone can play a drum. All that's required is a rudimentary sense of rhythm and a drum of your own. Pagan music has become a cottage industry. A quick internet search or a visit to your local pagan bookstore will demonstrate just how much pagan music is available out there. Many pagan chants have become standards, easily recognizable by pagans everywhere. If you're organizing your own group, you might ask participants to share a few of their favorites. Some of my favorite songs and chants were first given to me by friends and members of my own grove. And if you or any other member of your group has any composing skills, ask them to write a few chants or songs for your next rite. Used properly, music can create a deep emotional experience for those attending your rituals. As you gain practice with creating your own rites, your skill at choosing the proper music will grow. For this week's activity, search for at least one song or chant for each of the high days of the Wheel of the Year. If you can't find one for each high day, try composing one yourself. They don't have to be complex. Most ritual chants are simply rhyming couplets. When you've found them, practice singing them for the rest of the week, noting any changes in your consciousness as you do so. The Order of the Taibhsear is starting a repository of pagan chants and songs. You might start your search on our website at Taibhsear.com. If you've composed a chant or a song and would like to share it with others, you may also send it to us to be added to the list. Visit Taibhsear.com and click on the contact link to share your song or chant. That's Taibhsear.com.
Hecate, Demeter, Caridwen, Venus, Epona, Nephis,
come to us, be with us, Lady of the Moon, Lady of the Moon, Lady of the Moon. Come to us, be with us, Lady of the Moon, Lady of the Moon, Lady of the Moon. Come to us, be with us, Lady of the Moon, Lady of the Moon, Lady of the Moon. Come to us, be with us, Lady of the Moon, Lady of the Moon, Lady of the Moon. Come to us, be with us, Lady of the Moon, Lady of the Moon, Lady of the Moon. Come to us, be with us, Lady of the Moon, Lady of the Moon, Lady of the Moon. Come to us, be with us, Lady of the Moon, Lady of the Moon, Lady of the Moon. Come to us, be with us, Lady of the Moon, Lady of the Moon, Lady of the Moon. Come to us, be with us, Lady of the Moon, Lady of the Moon, Lady of the Moon. Come to us, be with us, Lady of the Moon, Lady of the Moon, Lady of the Moon. Come to us, be with us, Lady of the Moon, Lady of the Moon, Lady of the Moon. Come to us, be with us, Lady of the Moon, Lady of the Moon.
Hathor,
Come to us, be with us.
Acne. Be with us.
Tools of the Way of the Taibhsear. There are many tools that a Taibhsear would use to create a successful ritual. These tools are rich in symbolic meaning and energy. Some seasons call for specific tools for specific purposes, while others may be used at any time. A brief overview of some of these tools, as well as a description of each of their uses, would be as follows. The bell branch is a branch cut from a tree that is sacred to the bearer. It is covered with bells. Each bell represents a significant event in the life of the person who carries it. Taken all together, the bell branch is a living representation of the life of its owner. The bell branch is used to open and close rituals and to purify sacred space. In our tradition, the bell branch is harvested by a dedicant who has completed a year and a day of dedicant path study and has decided to take the way of the Taibhsear. The staff. This is sometimes called the spirit stick. It's usually made of ash and marked or carved with symbols that have meaning to the bearer. The staff is used to mark out sacred space, to measure, and to consecrate. The staff can also represent the tree of life when no tree or bell branch is available in the ritual space for this purpose. The sickle. Ancient authors like Pliny the Elder describe the Druids harvesting mistletoe using golden sickles. Today, many Druids have a sickle that they use to gather herbs or plants. This sickle has been consecrated for this purpose and should never be used for any other purpose. The robe or the hooded cloak. Ancient Druids are often depicted wearing white, hooded robes. Many modern Druids have continued this tradition. The white color represents the Nuevra, or the life force. When wearing a white robe for a ritual or a rite, a Druid is putting on the life force and gathering energy. The wand. In its most ancient meaning, the wand is a phallic symbol. It is used in ritual to evoke fertility and growth, and is used in magic to symbolize masculine energy. The Druid's egg. This is an egg-shaped stone used for protection and divination. In the Druid's egg meditation used by the Order of the Taibhsear, the Druid's egg is held in the hands as a focal point while performing the meditation. We'll be covering this type of meditation in a future podcast. In the meantime, you might wish just to find your own egg-shaped stone for use for this purpose. Few sticks, also known as Ogham runes. Few sticks are a special type of rune sticks. Each stick is marked with the letter of the Ogham. These Ogham runes are referred to as fews. They're used for divination and for the omens. In future podcasts, we'll be discussing several methods of divination using the Ogham fuse. In the meantime, you might wish to start creating your own set by collecting 25 sticks and carving, painting, or burning a character of the Ogham onto each stick. A bowl or a chalice is used in ritual to represent the sacred well from which all life and inspiration flows. A cauldron is used to represent the cauldron of Caridwen, the goddess of inspiration. It is also indicative of the womb and of feminine energy of a divine nature. Celtic people referred to themselves as cauldron-born, meaning born of Caridwen's magic cauldron. This cauldron is used to represent female energy and fertility and divine poetic inspiration. Candles are used to represent the fire in the head that was said to be the source of Celtic wisdom. They're used in ritual to represent order, knowledge, and wisdom. The sacred fire. The cross-quarter days of Samhain, Imbolc, Beltane, and Lughnasadh are considered fire festival days. Fire is sacred to Briad, the goddess of hearth and home. The sacred fire is used as a focal point for a circle. Omens may be read in the flames or smoke and ashes of the fire. Elemental fire sprites sometimes appear in the flames, and one who's skilled in fire scrying may interpret their messages. The crane bag is a bag that is usually worn around the waist. This bag contains a few sacred possessions of significance to the wearer. Many carry their Ogham fuse in this bag. It's similar to the medicine bag carried by many Native Americans. Today's crane bags aren't actually made of the skin of a crane. Manannan MacLear's wife, Aoife, was turned into a crane due to a curse. When she died, he took her skin and made a bag out of it for carrying his most cherished magical possessions. By carrying this bag, he always had his loved one with him. Today's Druids and Taibhsears honor this legend by referring to their magical bags as crane bags. Drums, flutes, and other musical instruments. Though not a requirement, such instruments can greatly contribute to the effect of a ritual. Both drums and flutes are relatively easy to learn to play, so if you have those handy and you can add music to your ritual or your rite, it will be greatly enhanced. Herbs, plants, fruits, and vegetables. These are used as votive offerings to the gods or the goddesses, and for decoration to set a mood for a given ritual. Incense. A well-crafted ritual engages as many of the senses as possible. The sense of smell is one of the most closely associated senses with memory. So using incense in your rituals can create associations that form pleasant memories of the ritual experience for the rest of their lives. A word of caution, though. Before using incense in a group rite, first ask if anyone present may have any allergies. Smudge sticks like white sage or bergamot are also sometimes used to purify a ritual space. Since white sage is a perennial favorite for this purpose, many pagans worldwide associate rites and rituals with the smell of white sage. If you wish to experiment with the tools listed here, you don't have to accumulate them all at once. You can buy or make your own as needed, with the exception of the bell branch. This should be taken from a tree of your choosing after you spent a year and a day developing a relationship with it, as we discussed in podcast number 2, Your Birth Tree. If you missed this episode, you can download it by visiting Taibhsear.com and clicking on the podcast link. That's TAIBHSEAR.com, and go to the top, click on the link that says podcast, and look for episode number 2, Your Birth Tree. If you have the skills and the talent to make most or all of your magic tools, they will be more meaningful and symbolic to you. But if you don't have the time or the talent, the tools can be purchased from expert crafters, and that can be just as meaningful to you. When selecting or making your tools, remember the concept of sacrifice. The more valuable a gift to the gods are, the more meaningful it is, and the stronger your energy will be. So if possible, try not to cut corners when selecting your tools, and select only quality instruments. Don't try to get out cheap. A final word on etiquette when using and working with magical tools. Before handling someone else's tools, it's always a good idea to ask their permission first. Tools used in magic are charged with energy, and some prefer not to have them handled by others unless they've been prepared to do so in some way. Also, as you start collecting your own tools, you may wish to be selective in how you loan them out to others so that you may control the types of energies they attract and collect. Every energy has its own purpose, and you don't want to mix energies that might be working at cross purposes. Doing so may diminish the power of any magical workings you do with your tools. The original meaning of the word sacred is set apart. Therefore, sacred spaces are sacred places that are set apart for the contemplation of the divine. While Taibhsears and most Druids hold that all places are sacred, we also consider that special places have a power to facilitate meditative states and contact with the divine realm. An example of such a place would be the sacred circle. Traditionally, Taibhsears don't wear watches or other timekeeping devices inside the sacred circle. This is because the circle is a place where time has no meaning. Druids have always believed that time and space are not separate things. The stone circles in Europe were aligned to mark the passage of time. In these places, time was measured in the sacred space. The perception of time is therefore linked to space, and this knowledge is written upon the land of the sacred spaces of Europe and the Americas. One tradition that many Druids celebrate is the marking of sacred spaces. If you're out walking in the woods, you may come upon a place that calls to you. Stop there and meditate for a while. If this place is particularly meaningful to you, you may mark it for others by making a small pile of stones. Traditionally, 9 stones are used for this purpose because 9 is a magical number. It consists of 3 triads of 3. From a psychological perspective, setting aside a sacred space allows you to enter that space, step outside of time, and do your own work of contemplating the divine within and without. If you have a special place set aside for this activity, and only for this activity, then entering it puts you in a special state of mind. Psychologists call this situation-specific learning. If your sacred space becomes associated in your mind with relaxation, meditation, and contemplation, then after a while, simply entering your sacred space will put you into a meditative state. If you don't have access to an outdoor place to create your own sacred space, you can create one indoors. Set up a small altar table somewhere in the corner of your home. Cover it with things that help you to achieve a meditative state. You may use candles, incense, houseplants, pictures of nature scenes, or pictures of loved ones. You can use anything that might help you connect with the divine within you. This might be a good time to talk about the concept of prayer and what it means to a Taibhsear. Prayer, in the way it's usually understood, has no meaning for a Taibhsear. What others might call prayer, a Taibhsear would consider communion with the divine. For a Taibhsear, there is no need to make petitions or requests, as a deity would already know what you need and would grant it or not based on their own judgment of your needs, and not based on what you tell them to do or not to do. For Taibhsears, there's no need for prayer in the traditional sense, because we already know what we need as well. To a Taibhsear, prayer is more of a meditative state that allows us to seek the imbus or the awan, that harmony of wise mind that comes when an emotional mind and a rational mind are in perfect balance. In this meditative state, we come to know that there's no separation. We are all one at the center, and we are all part of the divine, or that which some choose to call God. This is the deeper meaning of the sacred circle of the Taibhsear. The circle represents the universe, and at the center of the circle we are all connected to each other in ways beyond even our own understanding. In the sacred circle we are all one. There are places unique to each individual that would help to achieve the meditative state necessary to find the awan and to come to the knowledge of this unity of all things. These are the sacred spaces and the sacred places. If you're fortunate enough to own a parcel of land in a rural or semi-rural setting, you can mark out a sacred space for your own rites. Stone circles mark sacred places all over Europe, and many modern Taibhsears have continued this practice by erecting stone circles for their own ritual practice. You don't have to build another Stonehenge. A circle of small stones big enough to accommodate the members of your group would probably be sufficient. If you don't have access to stones, you might mark sacred space in another way. I have a friend who uses bales of hay, and he refers to his circle as Strawhenge. Our Mother Grove's last sacred circle was marked with 9 stones, one for each high day or Sabbat, and one at the center that also functioned as a central altar for our rites. If you're in solitary practice, you may still create your own space. If you have access to an appropriate outdoor space, you may make it your own by adding your own personal touches, perhaps an altar, a small pile of stones, or a statue to make your sacred space special for you. My Grove has also created a tradition that has helped us to define our sacred space. There's an oak tree near our ritual circle. Every year at Beltane, each member of the Grove brings a bell or a wind chime to hang from that tree. Before the Beltane rite, we each hang these bells from the tree in a brief ceremony. As the wind blows to the tree during our Beltane rite and our other rites, we remember all the friends and family who've hung bells on that tree and all the good times we've shared together. You may choose to mark your sacred space with your own variation of the hanging of the bells, or you may come up with some other ceremony that helps to make your sacred space special to you and to other members of your grove. The ultimate goal is to create a space that has special meaning to you and to anyone whom you invite to use it. Create an atmosphere of peace and tranquility that makes it possible for one entering the space to relax and to seek peace and inspiration. Find a sacred space to call your own. If you're fortunate enough to have a piece of property that has such a space, you may wish to set it apart for ritual purposes by marking it in some way. If you don't own property, is there a nearby park or other place that would be suitable for private ritual and contemplation? If not, you may always create an indoor altar. You can bring nature to your altar by adding potted plants or some other objects found in nature, like twigs, flowers, or feathers. If you have such a sacred space and you would like to share a photograph of it, you can email it to us at podcast@taibhsear.com and we'll post it on the website. That's podcast@taibhsear.com. the Taibhsear. We use the Celtic tree alphabet known as the Ogham. In this section of the podcast, we will present one character of the Ogham each week, offering information on the meaning of each letter of the Ogham alphabet, trees associated with each letter, the healing and magical properties of each tree, gods and goddesses associated with each tree and letter, and the divinatory meanings of each letter of the Ogham. Since we will be discussing medicinal uses of the plants in this segment of the podcast, please remember that herbal medicine requires caution and practice. None of the medicinal uses discussed on the Way of the Taibhsear podcast should be attempted by a novice. Some parts of the plants of the Ogham are poisonous, and people with allergies should also be aware of the potential allergic reactions to plants. If you are interested in herbal medicine, find a skilled practitioner and take lessons. Do not attempt to use medicinal plants without the supervision of an expert. The letter C in the Ogham alphabet is represented by Kol, the hazel tree. Its divinatory meaning is inspiration, creativity, and talent. Healing properties of the hazel. Shells of hazelnuts have been found in European cave dwellings that are at least 10,000 years old. Hazelnuts may be ground into a flour that is high in protein and vitamin E. Hazel twigs have been used since ancient times as natural toothbrushes and are said to leave your breath smelling sweet. Hazel twigs may reduce the bacteria that cause bad breath. A tea made from dried and crushed hazel leaves may ease coughing. Crush hazelnuts still in the shell, boil them, and make a warm poultice to relieve arthritis pain. Apply the poultice directly to the affected joint. Powdered hazelnuts can be mixed with honey or mead to help a cough. A tea of hazel leaves can ease a fever and help to reduce menstrual cramps. Hazelnuts are a good source of vitamins and minerals. Magical uses of the hazel. Hazel flowers bloom as early as February, close to Imbolc, or February the 1st. Because of this, they are often associated with the goddess Briad, whose sacred feast day is Imbolc. In his poem The Battle of the Trees, the bard Taibhsear says that the hazel was a mediator at this great battle. Because of this, hazel magic may be used to bring peace and for mediation between any two opposing forces. Hazel is the tree of wisdom and knowledge. Several different volumes of Celtic lore and mythology mention the sacred well of wisdom that is surrounded by 9 hazel trees. The nuts from these trees fell into the sacred well and were eaten by a salmon who lived there. These nuts were said to impart wisdom. For each nut a salmon ate, he gained a spot on his back. The more spots on the body of the salmon, the more nuts it had eaten, and therefore the more wisdom it had gained. Eating one of these sacred salmon of wisdom would transfer their magical knowledge to you. According to the Finian cycle of Irish lore, this happened to Finn MacCool when he ate the salmon of wisdom. The knowledge thus imparted to him led him to become a great bard, a great hunter, and a leader of men. Druids often make their staves of hazel wood in the hopes of gaining wisdom through its magical powers. Hazel magic is strongly associated with divination, and hazel twigs are often used in water dowsing. Gods and goddesses associated with this tree are Briad and Finn MacCool. The genealogy of Briad. This is the genealogy of the holy maiden Briad. Briad, flame of gold, noble mother of Lu. Briad, daughter of Dada, the Allfather. Every day and every night that I say the genealogy of Briad, I shall not be killed or wounded. I shall not be harried, nor put into a cell. Neither shall the Awen leave me. No fire, no sun, no moon shall burn me. No water, no lake, no sea shall drown me. No arrow of the Fae shall wound me. And I dwell in the mantle of the Exalted One. For I am the child of poetry. Poetry, child of reflection. Reflection, child of meditation. Meditation, child of lore. Lore, child of research. Research, child of great knowledge. Great knowledge, child of intelligence. Intelligence, child of comprehension. Comprehension, child of wisdom. Wisdom, child of Briad. You've been listening to the Way of the Taibhsear podcast on International Pagan Radio, where it's all pagan, all the time. This has been episode 12, celebrating the Wheel of the Year. Music on this episode featured The January Man by Dave the Bard, Lady of the Moon by Kellyanna, Make Sacred Space by Shauna Carroll, and Firefly Forest by Schenker the Vate from the upcoming album Mist on the Mountain. The Way of the Taibhsear is the official podcast of the Order of the Taibhsear. You can learn more about us at Taibhsear.com. That's TAIBHSEAR.com. The Way of the Taibhsear is a podcast about Druidry and Paganism as practiced by the Order of the Taibhsear. Paganism is a wide and diverse community, and we don't claim to speak for all pagans. You can get in touch with us at the show at podcast at Taibhsear.com. Again, that's podcast at TAIBHSEAR.com. The Way of the Taibhsear is sponsored by Pagan Promotions. Learn more about Pagan Promotions at paganpromotions.com. Until next time, blessings of the ancestors.